budget hearing, I'm just looking at this from the agenda side. We have that after announcement. So I'll call the meeting to order. Please join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. The flag is at the back of the room. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. So we do have, at the beginning of this meeting, a budget hearing. I think in terms of order, we'll adopt an agenda, and I ask the boards to agree to move the recognition of student athletes up until in the number 2 position right after adopt the agenda. From that point, we would go to the budget hearing, and after the budget hearing, then we'll go to our regular meeting, Board of Education comments and public comments, and from there. So asking to go from adopt an agenda to recognition of student athletes and then back to the order that we have above, but that first move will be to the budget hearing. So could I have a motion? Mary? Second, Todd? All those in favor? Thank you. The agenda is adopted. And we'll move, Chris, right to recognition of the student athletes. Chris is making us nervous. He never brings boxes up here. We don't know what he's got here.
Props, right? Good evening, Dr. Robinson, Board of Education members. Thank you for allowing me the opportunity to come in here tonight and honor 4 of our students and one of our coaches. Over spring break, we had a girls 4x8 team, relay team that competed in the Penn Relays down in Pennsylvania. It's widely regarded as one of the top meets in the United States at both the interscholastic and the intercollegiate level. We have 4 student athletes who are with us. I'd like to call them up tonight. Danielle Jordan, Emily Crowns, Hannah Reale, and Julia Zajko, and Coach Rob Cloutier. Come on up.
Thank you.
And Emily, stay right here. On Thursday, the girls went down and they won the large school heat. There's 2 large school heats, right, Rob, for the high school division. This qualified them for the very prestigious what is it referred to as? The Championship of America. It's the best 4x8 teams across the United States. And we beat teams from Jamaica. We beat teams from all across the United States, California, all across. These are the best teams in America. The girls won it. They have the fastest time in the United States in the 4x8 right now. So if you're looking where the fastest girls in the 4x8 reside, they're standing right in front of you here in Clifton Park tonight. Emily, who you guys who I'll introduce to you, was spiked in the race on Thursday and needed to seek medical attention where she had to get 10 stitches put into the back of her leg. I told Rob on the phone on Saturday, her mother is the MVP because she was the one who signed the waiver, which allowed her to run on Friday. Because as Rob said to me, he said, "Well, I don't have a plan B." And I said, "Well, you have Jill Shippey with you, and she's number 1 in the throws, so she could probably do okay." But Emily ran on Friday. Hannah Reale ran the last leg and made this incredible finish at the end. It was all over Mile Split, which is one of the most watched Twitter and Facebook accounts in the country. Hannah was actually honored as the female high school athlete of the meet at the Penn Relays. And so I was talking to Rob on Saturday. I was leaving here after some baseball games. Rob called me. He was out of breath as he's talking to me on the phone. And he says, Hannah doesn't understand. This is Olympians and this is NCAA national champions that are on this list. This is incredible. And these girls don't understand what they've accomplished. I said, well, I'm beginning to understand what they've accomplished. But I do want to put this in perspective for you before I call Coach Cloutier up. We have been fortunate before to win. We've won a couple of these. These are the heat. These are what you win if you win your heat at the for the Penn Relays. But I will show you what they did win. And Rob, if you want to get the girls to get. This is what you win when you win a national. This is what you win when you win a national championship.
So this versus this.
So this is for the heat. This is for the this is for the national championship, and you can see it highlights the nude men on the trophy much greater. But I do want to introduce Coach Cloutier, who wants to say something about his girls, but it's incredible to bring before you tonight a national championship 4x8 team from Shenendehowa, and it was quite an honor. So, Rob.
So, Chris did a great job of setting the table. So you get the big picture of the Penn relays. They've been going on for 122 or 123 years. This is the oldest and most historic meet in the country. Best of high school, best of college. Jamaica has already had their national high school championship, so they come up ready to really beat down on the Americans. And so there's a big USA versus Jamaica. They have USA versus the world races, so Olympians live on TV on Saturday. 15,000 people compete over 3 days. It's an amazing meet where it's one of the very few meets you'll ever go to in your life. And I've never done the Olympics. It'd be great to witness that. But the Penn Relays is for the spectators. And so it's not ideal for the athletes. And certainly on Thursday, we found out that Emily has 10 stitches in the back of her leg. And we're in the medical area for an hour getting her stitched up. And, you know, they say, listen, this might be very uncomfortable the next day. And you go through and you get these girls warmed up on Friday, not knowing whether they're even going to race. And Hannah being a sophomore, never at the Penn Relays before, they all run faster the next day. And it was just incredible. I actually almost fell over the railing, cheering, jumping up and down. I'm slapping some college kid on the back. I apologized. I ran down steps, fell down the steps, jumped over 2 fences just to get out there, and then I didn't even know what to do with myself. But so it was exciting for me because I've been going to the Penn Relays both years I ran for Shen, and then I competed in college 4 years there, and now coaching. We've never taken home a wheel. We actually won 3 in 2 days because our 4x4 won their heat. So you bring home all this stuff, and it just doesn't seem real. The really cool thing for these 4 girls is we've always preached the process is the goal. And so on a daily basis, the little things, because when you're in front of 20, 30,000 people in the stands, and you have a girl get spiked, and you have a sophomore on the anchor, and you need to do better than the day before, if you've done everything you need to do, you can go to the starting line with a clear head. And these guys did that. I knew that they were ready to do something special. It was just amazing to see because they've been close for years. You know, you have 2 seniors and a junior and a sophomore, and they've been runner-up at nationals, or at the state meet by less than a tenth of a second a year ago indoors. And then they were in the lead at nationals this indoor season, and they finished 8th. They missed the podium by 2 spots. So it's a process in terms of they've failed, and they've gotten closer. And, you know, it was awesome to see them so elated for each other and accomplish something this big. So a lot of fun, and really very proud of them.
Yes. Now grab that there for you.
Congratulations. How's the back of the leg?
Hannah, keep going.
Thank you. Oh. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Rob. Great.
Thank you.
Wow. Thank you very much.
Yeah, a lot of fun. Yeah. I'll send you an order of events.
Oh, good.
I'll send you a timeline.
Congratulations.
I just, real quick in closing, Friday night, our girls will be running in the 4x8 here. We started last year a Friday Night Lights invitational. Rob, we have 32, I believe we have 32 teams coming. We'll have over 1,000 students from across New York State participating here, and these girls will certainly be one of the highlights. The last thing I want to say to you is they brought that trophy home, and everybody said to me, they're like, Chris, what are we going to do? I said, I don't know what we're going to do. We're going to build another trophy case for that one. So anyways, I want to thank the board, thank Dr. Robinson for allowing us to highlight those 4 student athletes. And
Thank you, Chris.
Okay,
Thanks for your
thanks.
leadership.
Thanks, buddy. Yep. Bye, guys.
Thanks, Chris.
Thank you.
Take care.
So we'll move to announcements, which I probably should have done before. Just mention 2 things. One of our board members, Christina Rajat, is home ill. And secondly, our student person is here, Sheridan Messier, and welcome again. We'd like having you at the table. I'm sure you'll ask some questions. And we're moving directly into the 2016-2017 budget hearing. There will be an opportunity for questions from the audience and public discussion before we move into our regular agenda.
Good. So Mrs. Wetmore's here. So after we're done with the overview of it, there are specific questions that people have. She'll certainly come and address those specific questions. I also want to note that this is the detailed version of the budget itself with all the various budget codes, and this is located in the various libraries on campus as well as the public library for people who want to look at the details of the budget itself. Secondly, the budget newsletter developed by Mrs. DeFisciani will be distributed starting tomorrow. By law, we cannot distribute the budget newsletter until after tonight's public hearing. A lot of this information, certainly the board has heard before, and I won't necessarily go into a lot of the details with it, but certainly entertain questions if there are specific questions being asked. The 5 referendums for voters on May 17th, the first one being the proposed budget, the second being the bus proposition, third being the capital construction, fourth being the capital reserve, and fifth being board candidates. So I'll walk through each one of those briefly to give an understanding of what each one of those actually mean. The first proposition is, Proposition 1 is the budget, and these are also by the order of the propositions on the referendum itself. Just one step back. This year, for the first time, we'll be using electronic voting machines. So voters will get a long sheet of paper with the propositions listed on it, and it's a bubble in, and they bubble and put it into the machine, and the machine record the vote. So it's a different process than we've used in the past year. So the first year, we're going to use that. The first proposition deals with the budget ourselves. Our budget is a $166.3 million budget, increase of a little over 2% in the budget. A couple of things I want to highlight, and this graphic puts it in perspective. Last year's budget went up by 1.72. When I said last year, the budget we currently live in, the 15-16 budget. The proposed 16-17 budget is going up by 2.1 to kind of give you some perspectives. The property tax levy last year was 1.55. The property tax levy this year is 0.74. Again, perspective. Higher budget increase, but yet lower tax levy increase. A lot of that tax levy impact was lowered by the fact that this year we were, the GEA, the gap elimination adjustment, was reinstated for the school district. This goes back to 2009, where actually 08, 09, where at that point the district lost, if you will, or about almost $8.9 million was retained by the state in terms of state aid. And so between 09 and now 2016, finally the state is repaying that entire amount back to the school district. So as a result of that, that creates an opportunity for us to have a slightly higher than normal budget increase, but yet a slightly lower than normal tax increase as well. So it's a coupling effect of additional revenues. Related to this, our tax cap is a big piece that I hear people talk about, the 2% tax cap. And we've said it from day one, it's not a 2% tax cap. It was a great political ploy and statement being made, and a lot of people think it's a 2% tax cap. It's not, because it's tied to the CPI, the Consumer Price Index. So to give you some perspective, our tax cap in 15-16 was 3.17. Our tax cap for 16-17 is 0.78. Huge shifts in the amount of tax levy that we can generate. And that becomes important because the amount of taxes we can generate dictate, quite frankly, what we expend in the budget itself. So when you look at that piece of it, that became a point of concern for us as we look to develop the budget. The budget that we're proposing has a tax levy impact of 0.74. So a couple points to note from that. We are below the tax cap, which is important because a part of the tax cap law was what they call a plan where voters, and last year I called it, everybody got enough money back to buy a pair of shoes, not a very expensive pair of shoes, but a pair of shoes. So voters get back, if you will, the difference between what they paid for taxes the year before and what the new taxes are. Some cases, people didn't get anything back because if you saw a reduction in your taxes, there's nothing to get back, so to speak. So we are below that tax cap again at 0.74 with this budget. So we're pleased with where the budget is as we move forward. A couple of things that this budget seeks to address, and this graphic really puts it in place. When we think about the budget process, we collect a lot of information from a lot of different sources. to try to figure out then what do we prioritize, what we really do, put in the budget, what's new, what are we preserving, and what's the value added of those things, both new items as well as existing items to the budget. So we look at this graphic, we always think about first the instructional piece of it. A big part of this budget focuses on class size stabilization, particularly at the elementary level. In past years, because we've seen reduction in elementary class enrollments, we have been reducing elementary FTEs. This year, quite frankly with you, we say we have some flexibility in the budget. Let's not reduce overall FTEs at the elementary level. Some buildings will see shifts in sections because of enrollment shift, but overall elementary staffing should be pretty stabilized. So that's one big plus because that allows then the opportunity to have better class size sequences at the elementary level. And we'll be sharing some information with the board in the coming months on elementary enrollment in sections as we move forward. Another big part of this budget looks at the middle school level where we see the bubbles of enrollment taking place. Right now, our largest pockets of student enrollments sit in 7th, 8th, 9th, and 10th grade. Classes that are at 800 or slightly below 800. To give you a contrast to that piece of it, our graduating class, we could potentially, I think we're going to probably go about 750, 760 this year's graduating class. The largest class K through 5 is about 680. When you think about that contrast, so we literally have two different systems right now that we're looking to see what's the long-term implication of that. We're seeing a lot of in-migration, and the in-migration has allowed us to have stable enrollments overall. So we're still at a 9,800, 9,900 mark, and a lot of it is because of the in-migration, but the in-migration is dispersed all over the various grade levels, so it's not necessarily one level impacted more so than others. So however, the middle school is a piece that we're looking at because of the large bubbles going through. So some additional staffing capacity to address some of the issues in the middle school, as well as to address some AIS needs in the middle school as well. At the high school, some of the things that we've been focused on in past years in high school is this whole notion of disenrollment, particularly in some of the elective areas. Students want to take certain courses, but too many kids for the number of sections. So we start looking at that, analyzing which section, which departments, and try to impact those things as we move forward. So trying to address some of the district. Now, again, use some because no budget will solve all the problems. Every budget we're trying to do is try to address the problems in a more positive way. So we're looking to do those kind of things. Taking into consideration graduation benchmarks, and this is something we've been tackling for the past several years. Mr. DeLauro is a major advocate for what we call the 2022 phenomenon. It's still on the books with the state level, where the graduating class of 22, 75 is required for math and 80 required for ELA. A big, major concern for us. While it's a major concern, we have been trying to do the things for the past several years to build the capacity of students to be successful once they reach that point. However, it's still a major concern. So we start looking at those graduation benchmarks all the time. So therefore, we're looking at a couple of different things. Again, starting as early as elementary level. Big focus in the elementary level the past years on literacy, balanced literacy. The board was fortunate to allow us to have a literacy coach last year, and we're going to extend that for another year to really ensure that teachers are equipped to effectively maximize the Journey series, and as well as some additional resources we have done with Go Math. So math and ELA, strong focus at the elementary level. At the high school level, a big part of what we're trying to do is looking at certain Regents courses where we see, not necessarily we see a huge number of failures, but we see a lot of kids who are just passing, the 65 to 70 range. We have a lot of kids who are in that range, and trying to figure out then how do we try to provide some additional supports, recognizing that if we stay in that range with that significant number of kids, with the new standards, we're going to have a lot of kids who are not going to graduate from high school. And clearly, we need to address that before we reach that point in time. So looking at some summer Regents review courses, and I use the example of Mrs. Labor 3 years ago when the state decided to drop Algebra 2 in the summer, which was kind of ironic because it was the year after they put in the more difficult Algebra 2 test. We thought how smart that was. But anyway, Mrs. Labor actually sent me a nice little note in her nice Mrs. Labor note way. Said, you got to do something about this. And, at that point, I had a decent relationship with Commissioner King. Reached out to him saying, Commissioner King and Ken Stuntz, who was there, hey, you guys got to do something about this. Here's a great solution from one of our board members. Surprisingly, they turned around and said, you're right. And the next year, they actually instituted that piece of it. So it's the same kind of advocacy, and I use that kind of advocacy, and it's the same kind of advocacy Mr. DeLauro is on right now with the 2022 graduation pieces. So we're looking at some regional review courses at the high school, looking at some bridge opportunities for summer, particularly the bridge between 9th and 10th graders for students. Looking at some jump start program, looking at certain courses. How do we provide kids with some jump start as they go into certain challenging courses into the school year? So again, building the capacity to do those things, not only one year, but for future years as well. So the big part of what we're trying to do. Similar, we were looking at developing a model where right now, in many cases, in order for students to receive services, they have to be identified as something. But we also know that there are many kids who need services that aren't necessarily identified as something. So how do we build some capacity surrounding study skills and some of the other things that we know that students need that would be beneficial to students? So we'll be doing a lot of that thinking, a lot of that work over the course of the next several months as we move forward here. In the student support area, mental health service is the big focus that we want to focus on. It's a K-12 issue. The high school right now is embarking upon a wellness initiative at the high school. Mrs. Carmen is working feverishly with the Saratoga Center for Family to look how we expand that service to accommodate more students as we move forward. So the budget provides some capacity to address some of those kind of things, as well as some counseling capacity at the high school as well. So we're really looking at those support services. Instruction materials. This year's instruction materials, we do actually we invest quite a bit in instruction materials as a system. And so one of the things that we're going to do this year that's a little bit different, not significant in cost, but will make a significant difference for students in terms of their responsibility, their roles. The art program here, we have some phenomenal art programs here at the high school. We have phenomenal programs in many ways, but in this case, we're going to focus on the art program. One of the things that we found out is that a lot of these phenomenal programs also say to kids, you need to buy certain things for the class because they're consumables. In other words, if a student uses or take pictures, we don't keep them and say it's ours. To be quite frank with you, your phenomenal picture, you kind of keep your phenomenal pictures, but it's a required component of the class. So we're going to try to embed certain cost structures within our instruction materials. Similarly, one of the things that we've been focused on and for the years, moving more towards the integration of technology. The board passed the BYOD policy several years ago. The didactic committee has been working on different ways. So how do we better integrate technology, not for the just distribution of technology, but really use the technology to change the game, so to speak. And so this budget proposes to have a one-to-one technology approach starting in grade 6. So we're going to implement that, monitor that, like all the things that we do. We implement, we monitor, we evaluate, we make modifications, figure out what's working, what's not working, with the whole notion of transitioning up. At the same time, and the board will hear on the 24th board meeting, we have a pilot going on in grade 5 with Chromebooks to see how well that's working now. And based upon that pilot, we'll, quite frankly, just start the process going the other way. So the folks who are working on 6th grade doing this, we're almost done. They're actually just getting started because we're going to spiral up and spiral down at some point at the very same time. So we really embed in technology in what we do. So we're pretty excited about this particular initiative moving forward. The other pieces of the budget addresses a wide variety of things. From the operational side, we're looking at continue focus on security, looking at access cards, ID cards that serve as not access cards and other things. So we're looking at those pieces as we move forward. We're looking at some rehabilitation of athletic fields. Again, Mr. Coleman left, but certainly I think right now we have about almost 1,000 student athletes participating in spring sports. Huge venture as well. Looking at some science room equipment upgrades. Every year we've been doing this, and so we're going to continue to do that because we know that science equipment sort of change over the years, need change, the type of equipment change, the age of equipment, impact the ability to effectively do some labs. So we're going to look at those kind of things. Data analyst support. We rely on data. So the question is, how can we effectively transform data into information? How can we use data to make decisions more effectively? So some additional supports in terms of how we analyze information, how we share information, how we use information, how we use information to evaluate the effectiveness of the things that we're doing. And more importantly, how can we use data to predict our outcome and success by looking at longitudinal trends over the years, saying because of this trend, we can anticipate this is going to be the result some period into the future. So we're pretty excited about that proposition as well. And Dr. Wood and several other folks are working on data calendars, a lot of things, a lot of plans pulling together. The whole notion is we have plans, but now we need to put some resources to ensure that those plans can be executed. Similar to what we have done with WinCap over the years, and this tree just wants to go with me here. what we have done with WinCap and transition to technology over the years. We want to look at those kind of things. Inventory management for textbooks. We spend hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars on textbooks, but we don't have an inventory system for it. It's relied on every teacher doing their own recording. Some do it great, some don't. So how do we look at as a huge investment in the system? Textbook, iPads, a lot of the new instruction. How do we inventory that? Not only from accountability piece of it, but for us to have obsolescence plan and plan for it. So we could actually plan when and how we replace things, because when we're replacing things, Mr. Casey pointed out when we did the Journey series, we spent $1 million implementing across 8 elementary schools. That's huge investment in this case, literacy at the elementary level. So kind of put those things in perspective. Next board meeting, we're going to hear about some textbook proposals from Dr. Wood and others. So big part of that piece of it, print management. A lot of stuff, even though we have used not a device, we still print a lot of paper. So how do we manage that process more effectively? And so people put things in scale. What you do individually, multiply that by 1,000 or by 10,000. And that's the scale that we deal with when we look at these kind of things as we look forward. On the other side of the coin, there are some certain mandated costs that we look at every year, because these things could be tremendously challenging for the budget process, or they could create some opportunities. In this case, in the past years, pension costs has been a major challenge for us, because pension costs were doing this. This year, pension costs started doing this, and they're starting to level off. Creates an opportunity. Less costs we spend over here, more opportunities over here. But on the same note, we have to be wise, because eventually, like most things, the pendulum start doing this as well. So when we look at the budget, we look several years out and saying, what's the forecast for the future, and where do we budget from that sequence? So pension costs this year, this budget, has provided some benefits for us. On the other side of the coin, we hire people to do the job. A significant portion of our budget, probably about 80% of our budget, is salary and benefits. So if the $166 million, about 80% of it goes into people, directly, compensation and benefits for people. And so looking at health insurance is a big chunk of the equation. I think we're about, what, $40 million in health insurance, Kath? About $23 million, about $40 million in total benefits, about $23 million in health insurance, to kind of put that in perspective. And we're looking at health insurance rate across the board between prescription and everything else. We average around anywhere from 6 to 10%, depends on the plans. So we're looking at those kind of things. So those are huge cost drivers in the budget. So those are some of the factors that lend to that first slide that I pointed before, that slide 1 of this $166.3 million. That's what the budget is made up of. Not a lot of new things, but a lot of emphasis on preserving existing programs and services. A lot of those things. I'm just going to keep highlighting the next proposition, and we can come back with some questions. The second proposition for voters on the 17th, buses. We have 204 buses that leave the bus port every morning. We go about 1.9 million miles a year, transport about 11,000 kids. And somebody say, well, how can you transport 11,000? You only have about 9,800 here. Well, we have probably about almost 1,100 kids in private parochial outside placement of the school. We have a lot of our kids that go to special education placements. We have a whole bunch of different variety of combination of transportation arrangements as a result of being a public school. So we look at those kind of things. We even have kids who are in charter schools who live here, and I think we have a handful of kids that we transport to charter schools in Albany. We have kids who are homeless kids who are technically homeless here, but we transport them to other schools in other school districts. And so there's a lot of configuration that goes into transportation. So each year, and I'm going to kind of pick on Mr. DeLallo again, because this has been one of his pet peeves for the past several years. He liked the number 21 for whatever reason. Typically, we look to, on our replacement plan, we have a replacement plan for budget for our buses that look to have the average age around 7 to 10 years. That's the industry standard for school buses. And Mr. DeLallo always want this 21. Our range is actually probably more like 17 to about 23, and most years we've been around 19. This year, maybe Mr. DeLallo's lucky year, we're doing 21 buses. And just to put perspective, because sometimes I don't think people really don't appreciate the cost of the yellow limousines that we have for kids pickup. One of those big buses run us about $120,000, $130,000. So significant expense to do so, and we do it very well. The transportation department here is very efficient, one of the best certain in the state by DOT standards. So we're pleased to have this referendum up for voters' approval as well. The third referendum is one that I'm pretty excited about because we haven't had a capital project referendum in a number of years now, a $16.6 million project. This project is one that we have been looking to time the right way, and the best way I can kind of explain this is use a personal example. I have now a college student who drives. I have a 16-year-old with a permit, so I'm going to have a second driver. And so it dawned on me, wow, we need a third car. And so the question was, do I get a third car while we still have two outstanding car payments, or do we wait till one is paid for and bring the third car in so we still only have two outstanding car payments? In that scenario, our outlay of funds doesn't change because we're still on the plan for two cars. So what we have been doing in the school district, planning that exactly versus having two car payments and now adding a third car payment, which means you're spending more of your budget, in this case car payments. I use that because the same thing applied for debt service. When we look at the existing debt, mortgage payments that we have, debt that we have as a school district, we figure out when are things retiring, when is debt maturing, and when we add new debt to the equation. Right now, our debt is doing this, maturing very quickly because we have time and we're refinancing. It's a great time to borrow money. Not a good time to invest money. People actually want us to take money. Here, please, because the economy needs people to borrow money to stimulate it. So borrowing money is very cheap at this point. So we've been refinancing a lot of debt, same thing as people do with their homes, refinance because of interest rates going down and things of that nature. So as we look at the debt retirement piece, we're looking to add this project in, and literally next in 17-18, what we budgeted in debt service in 17-18 with the new project online will be less than what we budgeted in this current budget, which is what we want. So truly the impact on the budget, which means added impact on taxpayers, will be negligible, if not a negative impact. This line puts here to recognize that we get 67 cents for every dollar we spend, eligible dollar we spend from state aid. So I just wanted to highlight the sequence of it as well. We borrow $16.6 million. We don't borrow it all at once, and we borrow it in bands and bonds, depending on once we have a construction schedule, when we're going to do certain things, when we're going to pay certain things out. And then we look at the state aid. The state aid is paid over a 15 or 20-year, it's 20-year cycle right now. So we have to look at when state aid reimbursement is coming in and when we have to pay our debt payments. So there's a pretty complicated process that goes into that. But this just kind of gives some sense of folks, when you think about at the end of the day, with the 16.6, after the building aid is taken out of it, how much of it we start looking at the local share and what's the local share impact over the years as we move forward. The refinance of debt I just mentioned before is a big thing of it because we have a 15-year capital project plan that we shared with the board several months back with the notion of getting a cycle of every 5 years going out on smaller projects and again having very minimal impact, if any, on the budget, hence on local taxpayers. So we're pretty excited about this particular piece of it. What we're more excited about this is what this project entails. The first part of the project addressed what we call the priority 1, priority 2 items from our 5-year facility study. Every 5 years by law, the district has to hire a certified architect and engineer to basically walk every aspect of the school district, come up with a list of all the things that are current problems, potential problems, when those problems may arise and not arise, and create a list of things. As a result of that, we have a 5-year facilities plan. So we're focusing on what we call priority 1, priority 2 of it. So if the 16.6, about 10 million of it will address those priority 1, priority 2 items. So everything ranged from replacement of water pipes and water fittings to efficiency of seals on windows. So we're talking about major things that you'll never see to the little things that you really appreciate. To heat, to you name it, all those kind of things in the project. Another piece of the project that we're pretty excited about is the modernization of the high school East Library. Over the years, we have modified different libraries. This space was modified, for example. The elementary library spaces, even Scano, which was one of the ones that we didn't move, we still modified the existing space that in. The high school East Library is a space that we haven't done a lot of real modernization in quite frankly, I don't know when, certainly not since I've been here, over 10 years. So we're going to...
I think since 71 or 72.
Yes, in the early 70s when people wrote their names still, and I love you, and now those people don't know who those people are, but yet, we have Sheridan and her classmates trying to figure out who is Kelly D. It's Kelly Shannon who scratched her name on all the desks in the library. So So we're going to look at the high school modernization. We have a group of folks looking at the high school modernization. That initiative is being led by Dr. Wood, so we're, and Mr. Press is on that committee. So we're pretty excited to get that process going and getting some plans and truly walking into a space a year or so out that we'll be really proud of. Say, wow, this was a major investment. A third component of that is the district wayfinding and signage. This is something that oftentimes we take for granted if you're on campus for the first time. But there are many people who are absolutely lost every time they're on campus. Even people who work on the campus are lost every time when they're on campus. And Gowanus, ironically, here we are in Gowanus. Gowanus is probably the most difficult building to find on campus because you have a huge parking lot, and you have to, if you don't know the sign is up there, you have no idea where Gowanus is. And I joke because I was giving someone direction. It's next to the pool. Oh, we really don't have a really good pool sign either. Oh, it's across from all the buses. And if it's the wrong time of the day, you won't see any buses neither. So it's just one of those kind of things that we have to think about all the time. The things that you take for granted that we realize very quickly. But more important, when you come in buildings, and I know there's some high school folks here in the audience, and certainly board members appreciate it because you guys walk every building every year as a part of opening day. If you go to high school, particularly what I call the arrowheads, the far wing upstairs, you get lost every time. Stairwell 5 versus stairwell 3 versus this, and the numbering sequence is all out of whack. It's no one's fault. It's that when we added space, the sequence of numbers just didn't occur because it just didn't. And so we're looking at not only directional outside on the campus premises, and again, I shouldn't limit, I keep saying campus. This is at all buildings, on campus and all off-campus buildings, looking at wayfinding as well as signage within buildings. Pretty excited about that project because I think it's going to change the efficiency of a lot of things as we move forward. And the last component, certainly not the least component of this project, is looking at all 8 elementary school playgrounds. We also have a committee for that. We met this past week for the first time, and there'll be a lot of inventory of needs and looking at all the playgrounds and trying to see what we do more, what we do better. Shattercon, and well, probably more so Orangen. Orangen is 2015. Orangen is pretty much a brand new playground that we're going to look at to see if we can model some things off because consistency has become important in terms of having some standardization of the playgrounds. So we're pretty excited about this project as well. And so this will significantly change the quality of that outdoor learning experience for kids. So this is a neat project that we're looking forward to. Related to this to future project is the establishment of a capital reserve. There's no cost to establish the reserve, but by law we have to have voters to approve the establishment of the reserve, and also voters to approve the expenditure of whatever funds we accumulate in the reserve. So this is a reserve that we're looking for over a 20-year reserve to accumulate $12 million over the course of 20 years. Will we accumulate $12 million over the course of 20 years? Don't know. But we just put a limit on that piece of it. And the funds from this reserve goes directly back into offsetting whatever costs related to future projects, again, to eliminate added costs to taxpayers. So it's one of those things that we certainly want to ensure that this proposition is clear for folks as we move forward. And the last piece of the proposition, and I'll ask those members who are here just to simply stand. It's not an opportunity to give a speech, but to simply ask those members to stand. And I'll actually read from the bio. We have, obviously, we have 7 members of the Board of Education and Sheridan. And of the 7 board members, we have 3 seats up for re-election. Mr. Traynor announced several months back that he was not running for re-election, which essentially means that minimally we'll have 1 new board member on board, no pun intended. Of the 3 seats, we have 4 individuals running, 2 incumbents and 2 individuals running for the first time for the Board of Education. And I'm just simply going to read the description based upon how they are placed on the ballots. And how that happens is that, quite frankly, your name goes into a hat. Our internal auditor pulls the names, and lucky to draw however the order of names goes. It's literally that simple in terms of the order of names on the ballot as well. So the first name on the ballot, and I know she's not here tonight because she sent me a note. She also serves, Deanna Stevenson, who also serves as the co-president of the Acadia PTA, so she's actually running that PTA meeting right now. She says she's going to try to run right over, but if she doesn't make it, I certainly want to acknowledge that it's not because she doesn't want to be here, because she's fulfilling her obligation. She's, as I said before, she's the Acadia co-president as well as the current PTA council president. She's a Half Moon resident seeking her first term, employed by the New York State Health Facilities Association as Director of Management Programs. She holds a bachelor's degree in biology and forensic science from SUNY Oswego and is in the process of earning a master's degree in healthcare administration from Union College. She and her husband have 2 children attending Shenendehowa. That's Deanna Stevenson. The second person on the ballot is here. Mr. Delato, since you're here, can you just stand? You can sit right down. Mr. Gary Delato of Clifton Park is seeking his 6th term on the board, each term 3 years. So Gary's been this is 15th year on the board. He's a retired school teacher who taught secondary social studies in Mechanicville City Schools. He holds a bachelor's degree from McNeese State University and a master's degree in education administration, sociology, and psychology from LSU. He and his wife have 3 children who have graduated from Shenendehowa. That's Mr. Gary Delato. The third person running for the Board of Education is Ms. Kathleen Camley. I'm not sure if Mrs. Camley is here. Kathleen Camley of Half Moon is seeking her 1st term. She's employed in New York State Department of Transportation as a secretary for the Legal Affairs Division. She has an associate's degree in business administration from Hudson Valley Community College and a paralegal certificate from George Mason University. She and her husband have 3 children attending Shenendehowa and 1 child that graduated from Shen. That's Kathleen Camley. And the 4th candidate, Mr. Gilbert, can you just stand up and be recognized? Mr. Todd Gilbert of Clifton Park is serving his 2nd term on the board, is seeking his 2nd term on the board. He's employed at Time Warner Cable Business Class, has a bachelor's degree from SUNY Plattsburgh in business management and a master's of business administration from the University of Dallas. He and his wife have 2 children attending Shenendehowa. So those are the 4 individuals that are running for the board for 3 seats. May 17th is critical for us for many reasons, for the 5 propositions that you see here. But more importantly, May 17th is an opportunity for us to also hear back from the community. We have an exit survey that we'll be doing. Mr. Viciani just sent me a draft of it today to garner feedback from the community, not only about the budget, but about other factors that they think that's important to them as well. So this is the logistics of it. To vote, you must be U.S. citizens, 18 years or older, Shen District resident, at least 30 days prior to the vote. No pre-registration is required. We don't do pre-registration. People bring ID verification at the day of the vote itself. And we always remind people it's a crime to falsify your vote. Again, the polls open at 7 a.m. here in the Gowanus Gymnasium down the hall and close at 9 p.m. And certainly we want to encourage people to come out and vote on the 17th. So I'll stop there. If there's specific questions people have, I'll be more to try to address them myself. For the specifics I don't have, Mrs. Wetmore is here to provide some support with those questions as well. So not only open it to the board, but certainly to the public members who are here if you have any specific questions.
So we've been through this several times, the presentation, so I want to make sure we invite anyone from the public who'd like to comment, question. It's an opportunity to do that. Hearing none, any from the board?
Quick question, for proposition number 4, so the max funding is 12 million. So we're not spending that over 1 year, that's basically somewhere around the 20-year mark, we might hit that, and then...
So how the reserve works is, as I said before, the voters have to authorize to even establish it, and by law we have to define the parameters, and these are the parameters: separate account, cover the costs. So as what you see here is the exact legal language that by law we have to define this reserve. And so just take, for instance, fast forward 3 years from now, actually 5 years from now, when we go out on another referendum. Say at that time we have $3 million in this reserve, and we do referendum X for X million dollars, and the local share, whatever, just for conversation purposes, we got with a $20 million referendum in 2021, and the $20 million referendum may have, say, a $1.2 million local cost, and we have $3 million in the reserve. When we go out on that referendum, the language probably say something to the effect: $20 million referendum, allowing 1.5 to be withdrawn from the reserve to offset local costs. So it goes right into offsetting the local costs of their referendum. So whenever we use the reserve, we have to specify exactly what we're using it for and how much. So we don't have to spend everything we have in the reserve at any one time, but whatever we spend, we have to specify and ask the voters to approve that. And we're establishing this reserve as one of many ways, but certainly one of the primary ways, is to offset any potential local costs. Because as I sit here in 2016, I can predict with pretty high degree of confidence what the next 3 or 5 years of our finances is going to look like, even with the political uncertainties. Beyond that, pretty difficult. So this provides us some safeguards to say, beyond that, if we need some safeguards so we can continue this process of bringing projects on and not having an adverse impact on taxes, this gives us that opportunity to do so.
May I ask a follow-on question to that one? It just occurred to me. We've been talking about this as a means of flattening out our costs or spreading the cost over a number of different revenue streams or sources. But I was also thinking that in the event that we had some kind of catastrophic situation, a roof went, total heating system went and so forth, it would seem that, unlike some other things, would be immediately available to us with voter approval.
So again, great question. What it for? For purpose of construction, reconstruction, and improvement of buildings. We use that language very specifically because we don't know if you're going to be doing new, existing, or otherwise. Again, so if we have this major catastrophic situation, if we have that, more than likely we probably take some more emergency stipulations, and because we have to probably repair faster than the typical process is. But say, for instance, if we see something that we didn't anticipate that's going to be significant, and we have reserve funds, and we say, you know what, yeah, you know, it's not it's a $3 million problem. Let's call it that, using that same notion. And we then go out to the voters. We want to do this $3 million mini project to address this specific construction-related thing, using these reserve dollars for the purpose of it. One of the things that we always want to do is then, how do we make sure that we maximize in the state aid in those sequence of it? So the example is more for illustrative purposes, because if we had a $3 million project, we won't use $3 million in reserve for it. We probably use, who knows, $100,000 in reserve to offset the local piece of it. But again, your example is saying that if it's something that's not in our planning sequence that occurs, the reserve language allows us, but the key part of it, each time we need to go out to the voters to say, this is what we plan to do consistent with the language, and we need your approval to use those funds accordingly. So it's not a unilateral decision by the board or otherwise. It's a voter decision. That's why we need voter approval to establish it.
Just a question. Could you go back to the original slide that had the comparison from last year to this year?
There you go.
Yep. You had made a point about the difference in the tax levy versus the increase. We're actually increasing our budget by a higher percentage this year, yet our tax levy is significantly less. It's a
You ask a
conceptual
really
question.
hard question.
Lights out.
But keep talking. I think we.
So the question
Kept
is,
us honest with it.
you had mentioned that the a big factor in that was the restoration of
The gap elimination adjustment.
gap elimination, but also do we know how much of an increase in assessment there was within the district
Yeah,
that
good point.
offset it?
So very good point. As Kelly shared, so in the budget newsletter, we're a lot more detailed than here taxpayers will get. The actual amount of taxes that we levy, again, give you a perspective. For 15-16, we collect $115.2 million in taxes. So most of our revenue comes from taxes. In fact, about 72% of our revenue for the district come from taxes. And for the 16-17, we're looking at about levying $116 million. So very close, and that's why that 0.74 is not as significant in terms of the difference. So I'm not sure of the question, that's the specific
Well, I'm
question you're
actually asking
Jim's
about
asking about
the
the
assessment.
assessment side,
So-
which we find out in May.
Total assessment.
So the total, the pool of funds that we get that from This is what you mean, assessed valuation of properties?
Yes, the assessed valuation of all properties within the district probably rose over the course of the
Okay,
year.
so I don't have the exact number, but we can certainly provide that to the board. Part of the issue we have, the dilemma with our tax cap being so low, because, well, quite frankly, it's kind of hard to figure out why the tax cap is so low in certain school districts, because I know some places that are awful poor communities that are seeing negative tax cap numbers. And some of that is because they're eliminating debt off the equation and they're being penalized for not having any debt. So there's a whole different equation. Some of the reason why our tax cap is so low, partially because we're doing such a good job eliminating debt, plus we're a growing community in terms of assessed valuation. So the state has a growth factor, and I think this year's at 1.3, 1.1% growth. We thought it was going to be higher because, again, when we say growth, when you drive around bricks and mortars, when you drive around the community, you see buildings popping up, and you make the assumption that, wow, we should be seeing a lot of growth, but it surprisingly wasn't as high as we thought it would be. And some of it is timing of when things take place. March 1st is an example of a deadline, and builders are great doing this. They ensure that certain things aren't done until after March 1st because they're not on that tax roll. It's a wonderful thing. And we know that, and so we look at that, we try to figure out timing. And so ain't no thing I do on Sundays when I'm bored, literally. I take circuitous routes across the district to go to the district office to get a newspaper. It's not about getting a newspaper. I actually drive to the different developments to see what's happening within that, because I'm always shocked to see places that I'm like, wow, I didn't know that was happening, because they would give us some sense of, are we growing assess-wise as a school district, are we shrinking or otherwise, and then it gives us a chance to start talking about, for a perfect example, 146 here, what used to be office complex between the public, right across from CVS. And now it's called Town Plaza, the new signs there. Total renovation of what used to be empty offices. We have seen huge tax surcharge claims come to have a reduced assessment because those offices weren't generating any revenue because most of those buildings were, quite frankly, empty. However, now I'm happy to see that they're reconverting those buildings into something that would generate greater market value for those property, subsequently greater tax impact, because commercial increases reduces the reliance on residential taxes. And so sometimes it's that balance of how much is too much commercial versus residential, but we know that there's an offset sequence of it, so we look at that very closely. And so you didn't ask this question, but something I want to point out, that when we look at the amount of taxes that we levy, and we use a $250,000 assessment for the average assessed valuation of properties within the school district. And for a person with a property assessed at $250,000, and the reason I say assessed, if you live in a $350,000 home, your property probably going to be assessed at something around 250, because it's not a one. In the town of Clifton Park, the equalization value isn't 100%. It's a partial equalization assessment. So for a house with a $250,000 assessed valuation, that property will see about a $10 increase in taxes. So very minimal increase. So we'll see a lot of people with reduction in taxes, and we see some people with a slight increase in taxes. And that is a result of the overall assessment growth for property, not only across the district, but also in different towns. Half Moon is our fastest growing town. In fact, Half Moon is still one of the fastest growing communities in upstate New York. Clifton Park has been stable, and so we're watching that. We're watching the growth in Malta to see how that's going to impact us as well. But all those things impact ultimately what taxpayers pay as individuals. So, long answer to a short question.
Sheridan, you had something.
Yeah, going back to the reserve, I'm sure you mentioned this, but where exactly does the money that goes into the reserve come from?
Good question.
Good question.
So, at the end of every year, and this happens July, August, after we go through the audit process, Mrs. Wetmore and her team, we have outside independent auditors come and audit our books, and they audit, what did we expend, revenues, expenditures, what revenues did we bring in, and then that difference. So one of the goals that every year we have to create what we call fund balance, because as a part of our revenue stream is every year to contribute certain amount of fund balance to the revenues for the next year. And so every year, we try to see what's that difference, if you will, between expenditures and revenue, if you want to look at it this way, expenditures and revenues. And that difference is that fund balance. The state law allows us to carry over 4% fund balance. So we look at that. Can we in fact carry over 4%? And we haven't gotten to that 4% mark. We've gotten close, but we haven't gotten to that 4% mark since the law has allowed us to carry 4, because we budget pretty tightly in our process. That's why you see our average budget increase is about 1.5% over the past 5 years. So we look at that difference, and so we make the decisions then. The decisions are, how much of it do we use to contribute to this 4% allowance? How much of it do we use to contribute to other reserves? This being potentially one of those reserves. So it could be a decision, okay, we have reserves that address employee retirement system. We have probably 4 or 5 different reserve accounts that we use to say, okay, do we contribute to this reserve or that reserve? One of the bigger reserves that we carry is a reserve for tax tertiary accounts. Tax tertiary accounts, basically people, particular commercial buildings, people who want to lower a tax assessment, and every year we get them. This is the time of year we get them. We get a lot of lawsuits, basically people suing to pay less. And we have a lawyer, we go through courts, we do all this rigmarole, and every year, what we can't have is a situation where, because we have to pay back somebody because the value of their property changed, that we now are going to say budgetarily we can't do something else. And so the reserves ensure that in order to pay back developer X, we're telling Johnny that he or she can't have a class. So that's why the reserves in a very simple way. So that happens in August when we look at that balance, and then at that point, the board, we make recommendations to the board to say, hey, let's contribute X amount to this, X amount of that, and why we want to contribute X amount to those kind of things. And so over time, you build those capacity into the equation. So that's how the reserves are accumulated.
Okay, thank you.
So great question.
Thank you. Any additional questions? If not, we'll move to our regular order for business. Thank you, Oliver, very much. We know from listening to you, you're passionate about Shenendehowa and the good work that a lot of people do to help bring these budgets together. We'll move into the portion of the meeting where we hear from the Board of Education. Any comments they have? Jim?
Just a point of order. Are we opening up for public discussion on the budget?
Well, we asked.
We asked, and
Oh, nobody
yeah,
did.
before the board commented. Yep, sorry.
Thank you, Mr. President. I just wanted to comment sort of in an indirect way on the budget and the 5 proposals, and with your permission, just direct my comments more to our constituency
Yeah,
and the board
absolutely,
itself.
sure.
This is a great budget. It's the best budget from a taxpayer perspective, certainly in my short 3 years on the board, but more so because it enhances a lot of things while at the same time not increasing the expenditure significantly. But I want to address mostly participation, an issue that I feel very strongly about and wish I had done more during my tenure to help promote. But traditionally, every year lately, we've had about 15% of the eligible voters in the district come out to vote. That's 1 in 6. We can do much better than that as a district, as an extended community. And, I thought back to when the New York primary was taking place and ingested a lot of the comments, both in the news media and the newspapers, of people who complained about not being able to vote in the New York primary because New York uses a closed primary system. Well, we're on the opposite extreme as a school district. Not only do we not require people to vote or register in a particular party, but we don't even require them to register to vote. You just got to be 18, show up with an ID that shows that you're a Clifton Park resident.
District resident. More than Clifton
Yes,
Park.
you're right, a district resident, I'm sorry. And you vote. So it's a very open process, and I would just encourage everyone to come out and vote. And I know it's a busy time of year, particularly for young families with active children who have activities in the evening. But I'd encourage you, I'd implore you to show your kids how important it is to exercise your right to vote by bringing them to the polls. Watch you vote and show them how important it is to exercise that constitutional right. Thanks.
Thank you, Jim. Great message.
I think you copied off of me. So that was actually identical to what I was going to say for my first point. The other point was just a couple notes on last week. So there were two things I wanted to comment on. I wanted to thank the STA for putting on the Meet the Candidates night last Tuesday. It was a great opportunity for Gary, Deanna, and I to be on stage, just talk a little bit about the candidacy. So thank you for having that for the public. The other thing, again, that happened last week was we had a meeting at the district offices on Wednesday with the Shen Shop, which is going to be our new apparel online shop. And I've talked to probably about a dozen or so people that had attended, and everything was positive. So I think that's a great move that we're going to do. I know there's some concerns. It's not going to be an all or nothing thing. It's just going to be a great opportunity for people who want Shen apparel to get, real Shen apparel. So again, very positive feedback on that. So those are my comments.
Mary?
A few things that I wanted just to highlight. One of our Shen Robotics mentors has been around in the program for 25 years. His name is Lawrence Ruff, and he was awarded a Capital Region Jefferson Award for volunteerism, and was one of the individuals representing the Capital Region at the National Jefferson Awards, which will be awarded in June. So certainly want to wish him well and thank him very much for his service with the robotics team. Robotics, once you're in, you're in. There's like no getting out of robotics, so it's good. I wanted to share with you an experience that I had, anecdotal. I was in an orthodontist's office on April 11th, and a call came into the receptionist, and the conversation was, no, the state tests aren't on this day, the state tests are on this. No, I'm really sure. No, the school told you. Just the impact of that in the community, in the orthodontist's office, was kind of an eye-opening experience. I wanted also to let you know about the college admissions panel and college fair that was held at the high school. I thought it was really well attended, and there was great diversity of institutions represented, public and private, long distance and close by, but also trade schools and two-year universities or schools and four-year colleges. And so there was, I think, a little bit of something for everyone, and I was glad to see the turnout and families and students participating in attending that. And then the next night was Science and Health Discovery Night, and I don't know how you could go wrong with a volcano and puppies. There was a little bit of something for everybody there. I'm sure those ping pong balls from the volcano are going to have a completely different meaning once people leave the walls of Shen, but people were really excited. Lots and lots of community members, young children, older people, Shen inventors, you name it, we had it, and that was a great night. It takes a lot of work and a lot of volunteers and sponsors to pull that off. And I wanted just to say thank you for that. In the Times Union editorials, which I don't always make a habit of reading, just for the sake of my own sanity, but there was a letter from one of our bus drivers. His name is John Fay, and it was a really, really powerful and compelling letter about student safety and drivers passing school buses, and the risk and the anxiety of a driver watching this unfold and hoping that the students off the bus whom he can't grab but has to get the attention of, that there's a danger of drivers being inattentive and passing school buses. And I just thought what an amazing job he did from his perspective behind the wheel, what that means and what that looks like, and great service to our students. I was at the Town of Clifton Park meeting for the budget presentation, and I stayed to listen to the presentation of our artwork and recognition of our students for their Arbor Day artwork, and our Eagle Scout, who's a student at Shen, being recognized by the town, and I'm always proud of that. And then I wanted to share with you PTSA meeting. I'm the liaison, one of the liaisons at the high school, and we heard a presentation on the quilt project, which is still one of our big service projects, and it's district-wide. PTSA are encouraged, are being asked to support the quilt project, and they brought some of the samples that have been worked on in the last little bit. Students from the life skills classes and students from the Art Honor Society all participating in this project, and we've had quilts on the space shuttle, which is the coolest thing. So that is still alive and well, and student participation is great. And I also heard that student feedback is being invited on the library renovation project, and I just thought, that's perfect. Who better to ask what we need to do differently, how we can improve the space than the students, and I'm grateful that they're being invited to participate. And to your point about participation, I challenged the student council reps to go back to students and challenge them to vote. And I know that PTSA posted on their Facebook page that students are eligible to vote if they're 18 and all the other requirements. There's no reason in the world that our students can't cast their first vote about their school. And so hopefully we'll see a little bit more participation that way. And I think that's enough.
Thank you, Mary.
You're welcome.
Gary?
I'd like to make a little further comment on the 4x800 national championship relay team. I made a comment earlier to Dr. Robinson relative to the role of sports in school. Now, this community is very supportive of its sports program, and we do have some parents who see absolutely no value at all in sports. I had an uncle who absolutely forbid his son to participate in sports. And I can't say it was a failure. He's a dentist, and he was a professor of dentistry at Georgetown University before they closed down the program there in dentistry. So certainly he isn't a failure because he didn't participate in sports. However, there are things that happen in the field of competition that simply cannot happen and cannot be replicated in a classroom. The idea of mental toughness, the young lady who ran despite the fact having 10 stitches in the back of her leg, that's tough. Perseverance in the face of falling short, and I'm not going to say failure, because every time you go out there, you do your best. That's not failing. But to take the lessons learned and to build on that, to work harder, to see what you need to do better the next time to be more successful. Those things happen from sports when they're run the right way. And obviously, we have a team of young ladies that have reached the epitome of success. But each and every child that participates in a sport gets something out of it. And I think it's a very, very important thing for us to have available to all those kids that want to participate in it. I also had a couple of comments, just a little addenda relative to some of the stuff that we were talking about and relative to the budget. One of them had to do with the debt that we carry and how that is actually something that can be added on top of the other tax cap so that we can go a little bit higher than if it was just basically based on the cost of living alone. Well, we do a really good job of managing our debt, keeping it relatively flat, so that as we add projects, we add them only when others are pretty much surrendered. So the debt level remains constant. And consequently, the taxpayers incur no additional taxes. That's a great practice. It's very intuitive. It seems to make sense. One thing that does not make sense, however, is that school districts are being penalized for good stewardship of funds when they pay down their debt. It resulted in a negative tax cap. There are school districts, I've forgotten the exact number, quite a sizable number of districts in the state of New York that will not even be able to levy as much of a tax levy on their population as they did in the previous year, basically because of the fact that they were good stewards and did what they thought they really should do for the benefit of their residents, and they reduced their tax level. The other thing that I wanted to mention, Dr. Robinson has mentioned twice last night and then again this evening about my advocacy for the number of buses that we add to the fleet. And it's true, each year, even if I don't actually say, I think we ought to add more buses. There's always a question in there about, is the fleet getting older because we're not adding enough buses? And there's a reason behind that. When the fleet grows older, the amount of maintenance increases with the increased mileage. And after you get to a certain age level, it kind of just picks off. It remains relatively straight line for quite some time, gradual inclination, but once you reach a certain break point, it just escalates tremendously. And so the idea is obviously to keep your fleet as young as possible to stay below that break point. And so my concern was not an arbitrary number or advocacy for, 21 buses, but what is going to allow us to, over the course of time, to roll over our bus stock so that the age of the bus fleet remains relatively young, or at least below that point where the costs escalate for maintenance. And what we're doing this year is a step towards reducing the age of the fleet or stabilizing it rather than seeing it progress. The last thing I wanted to mention, and this is something, additional information for Sheridan. She asked about the reserve. A few years ago, I don't know how many now, we used to be able to have as much as 2% reserve. And this is it's sort of a contingency fund in the event that something comes up, because everything else is essentially committed within the course of the budget. Now, the state legislature decided that because of advocacy by school districts and said 2% simply wasn't adequate, they went up to 4%. Now, one of the things to put that in perspective, it sounds like a lot of money, but the town of Clifton Park had at one time something like $14 million in reserve because there is no control on the amount of money they can keep in reserve. It's just not required by the law. And businesses that are often held up as the model for the way things ought to be operated typically reserve 10 to 15%. So the 4% is really quite modest, and it really is quite not necessary, and we rely on it from time to time. That's it.
Bob? I'll be very brief. All great comments from everybody. I'm going to defer till we get to the information items and maybe speak a little bit more.
Good, thank you. I just have one announcement, kind of a plug for the Green and White Gala, which is sponsored by the Shenendehowa Education Foundation. It's scheduled for June 4th at 6:30. It's a Saturday night, 6:30 at the Hilton Garden Inn. So the Education Foundation has one big fundraiser a year. The goal is to raise at least $50,000. That's what we raised last year. What do we do with the money? This year, just in terms of some things that we saw some grant approvals for, we provided the principal amount of funds needed for the alternate education seniors to take a trip at the end of the year, providing, and I think you probably got an invitation, of a free library to be opened at Half Moon Heights. That request came from a number of teachers here at the school who teach the students from Half Moon Heights and saw a need for continuing education, availability of books, and free and trade-ins. They've got it all worked out. We've funded some mindfulness programs, continued to fund anti-bullying programs, and the big initiative this year is trying to start the initial work to establish the Shenendehowa Alumni Network. We're doing that in consultation with the counseling center. From the school's perspective, interest in being able to track our graduates and be able to contact them and follow up on how they're doing. And from the Education Foundation side, trying to help form what will become the alumni network that will be used, might even be used for fundraising by the Education Foundation. I would bet that. And one other thing I want to call out about this gala, every year we recognize a couple of graduates of Shenendehowa who receive a Distinguished Alumni Award. This year, the two recognized people are two women Jennifer McPhee, who's the Merrill Lynch General Manager for the whole area. Not only does she do that, a very responsible professional job, but Jennifer is also very involved in mentoring women in business, and that's part of the recommendation. The other person that we're recognizing is the first senator from Shenendehowa, a Shenendehowa graduate, Senator Kathy Marchione, who's a graduate of Shen, so she'll be recognized as well that night. Tickets are available through the website, actually through the Shen website, and click on the Education Foundation, and then there's a further link to the Green and White Gala. So just encourage people on that. With that, we will move to public comments. I don't know if our students are here. Well, they can come up, and I'll read my thank you. I'll read the prelude to our message for residents. This is an opportunity for the public to address the Board of Education. Any residents in attendance? If so, please complete. There's a comment form. This is something new. The board will not address specific comments, but ask for your name and address in the event follow-up is necessary. The board reminds residents of the public comment portion of our meeting. There's only one item on a long agenda. We therefore ask that each speaker be succinct as possible and the remarks be limited to 2 to 3 minutes. We also expect the residents to speak in a respectful and courteous manner so as to model proper civility and decorum for our students, and we commit to do the same. Residents may also contact the board via boe@shenet.org. All questions come into the Office of Public Information Officer and are shared with the board and or superintendent as appropriate. The policy questions are typically answered by the board president. Operational questions concerned typically addressed by the superintendent and or designee. So if anyone from the public would like to line up to speak, in the meantime, we have our student representative.
Thank you. Unfortunately, Sarah couldn't make it tonight, but I only have 3 issues to kind of, well, not issues, but 3 things to talk about. So on May 20th, it's a Friday, we have the speak out for technology. So
good.
if you guys would like to show up and
What time is that?
15 to 1:15.
May 20th.
Yep,
yep, May 20th.
10:15 to 1:15 during
Thank
lunch periods.
All right, and then next topic is the new Senate session starts next week. So the next Board of Ed meeting, myself and Sarah will be introducing the new reps to the Board of Ed. So you guys will have 2 new shining bright faces to enjoy for the next year. And then our third topic is going to be the Senate banquet. So on behalf of the Senate, I would like to formally invite all the members of the board to our annual banquet. That's going to be on May 25th from 4 to 6 at the Van Patten Vista. So if you guys can make it out, it'll be, you guys are.
And that's like at 5 o'clock, I remember, something like that?
4 to 6.
4 to 6, okay, thank you.
Yep. And if you guys have any questions, you guys can email Ms. Conway.
Okay,
25th is a banquet, right?
Yep, 25th.
25th. Thank you.
That's it.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
At this point, I'd like, anyone from the public who'd like to speak? For the board, I'd just ask you to identify yourself.
Absolutely. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Good evening, Superintendent and Board of Education. My name is Sarah Quinn. I am a parent, I am a taxpayer, and I am an 18-year veteran teacher at Acadia. This is the second time in 18 years I've come to the board to ask your consideration of something. The first time was years ago when we were losing counselors due to the budget vote. Generally, I work very hard to advocate within my position and within my department and with my colleagues for the things that I value as a teacher and as a parent for my children. And I'm very hesitant to come up here tonight. Makes me nervous. Speaking out as a teacher in my own district, even though I'm a resident and a taxpayer, is a somewhat narrow line that I worry about walking quite often. And I am here tonight to talk about the review of the homework and grading policy that you've been charged with as a first read tonight. And it's a big deal. And I've collected a number of concerns from middle school teachers who, after Superintendent's Day, had many questions about the newly revised policies. As an effort of professionalism and good faith, I also met with Dr. Wood to go over my questions and concerns and have now brought them forward to you with Mrs. Crump from the high school for your consideration. And the thing is, they were part of an email to you.
Part of the email we
Yes,
received today, just want to
correct.
verify.
Yes,
Okay,
that is part
sure.
of the email, and I was the responsible party for
Candace.
collecting the middle school
Thank you.
perspective
Yep.
on this policy. But as a parent, it's also very important to me to speak out on these policies because I trust my kids' teachers to kick their butts. And I mean that academically, and I mean that when they are messing up socially or emotionally. I have faith in my teachers, my children's teachers, my colleagues, my friends, my neighbors. And I expect that my neighbors step up when my kids do wrong or need help with something, and I expect their teachers will too. And they have. We have great teachers here. And I want every teacher to really feel empowered by policies and regulations instead of restricted by them. And I would expect that teachers would use their solid professional judgment to build a strong program within their classrooms for my students, for my kids, biological and classroom-wise. So, as Superintendent Robinson noted earlier, with the Common Core and Regents' expectations rising, with the stakes becoming greater, with the testing requirements going up, the stakes for teachers and students are getting harder and higher too. And so I ask you to please listen to the voices that were represented in the documents we shared and take them to heart. Because the teachers do have a number of very solid and serious concerns. And as parents, knowing that my children, the one in high school east in the fall, middle school in the fall, and second grade in the fall, are going to fall prey to these policies as well. And I want my children challenged at every level, and I know that the rigor that we intend as community members and practitioners here is committed to excellence, and I do worry that some of these policies will impede that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sarah. Deb?
I have a statement that I'd like to read, or actually a letter that I'd like to read, and I request that this gets admitted into the minutes, and I have a copy for you folks as well.
Great.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen of the board, Dr. Robinson. For those of you who don't know me, I am Ann Moore, and I've been teaching at High School East for 20 years, and I've been an educator for a total of 30. I've come to talk to you tonight about a document with which you will be presented, the proposed homework and grading policy. While I cannot tell you what to think about the document, I can, as a highly effective teacher, give you background information about the evolution of the document you will receive. I would also like to ask that you slow down the process for policy implementation to permit all stakeholders the time they need to digest and respond to the final draft. Last spring, educators from various levels volunteered their time to serve on the Homework and Grading Policy Stakeholder Committee. The goal of the committee was to review current literature and to draft grading and homework policy for the Shenendehowa Central School District. As the committee met, a variety of concerns and comments were voiced by the educators on the committee, not the least of which was the literature presented by Dr. Wood that predated the Common Core. Few of those comments or concerns were considered in the initial draft document. A survey then went out to faculty, parents, and students in the district. The survey was poorly developed, biased, and had no place to object to or comment on the statements or questions in the survey. Some educators, especially our special education teachers, were not permitted to complete the survey because they did not assign homework, which was the first question that was asked on the survey. If you answered no, you couldn't access the rest of the questions on the survey. And that essentially told them that their opinions and concerns did not matter on this particular topic. So their voices were not heard in that survey. On Superintendent's Conference Day in March, attendees were asked to review and comment on the proposed policy document. Groups, and they were groups that were pre-designed, not groups by department, groups were given an inadequate amount of time to read, digest, and think about what the document contained, what it proposed, and the possible consequences, desired or unintended, of the implementation of the written document. As Dr. Wood collected group comments and prepared a document for administrators that contained the comments made on the conference day. Dr. Wood has admitted to members of our group to revising the draft document only slightly after reading the comments given to her on conference day. Most educators have not seen the conference day document compiled by Dr. Wood. We don't know what's in it. Tonight, the document you will receive has not been reviewed by educators or building level administrators. We have not been offered the opportunity to review and ask questions about the policy and, almost more importantly, its implementation. Before you have even voted on these policies, we as educators have been directed to implement parts of the proposed policies for the beginning of the next school year, 2016-2017. However, at this time, many of our questions and concerns have not been addressed in a formal and open forum with building or department administrators. The directions we have received from building level administrators show they are confused as we are about what exactly the policies say. These policies are worthy of thoughtful study and discussion by the practitioners, the educators, charged with implementation. They potentially have a significant impact on curriculum, instructional program, and assessment. No one should be rushing the implementation of policies that impact such important aspects of teaching and learning. And I read something before I left the building that someone presented to me that was in one of the policies. Some of the policies that are being presented to you may actually violate New York State education law. The children of this district deserve a fair and equitable homework and grading policy. They deserve to have teachers who are compassionate and provide a thoughtful and meaningful experience in the classroom. Teachers who help them hone skills that are needed in the world of work or academics. The policy we have seen, which admittedly has changed very little since March, does not permit Shenendehowa to put its best foot forward. I would like to ask you all to consider what I've said to you tonight while you are reading the draft policy you will be provided. As educators, we must make informed decisions about what we do with the children of this district. I hope I have provided information to you this evening and data, because as Dr. Robinson said earlier in this meeting, we are data-driven. I hope I provided you some information that makes an informed decision possible for you all. Thank you very much. There you go, Dr. Robinson.
Thank you, Ann. We normally don't comment on comments given to us, but I do want to provide just a brief framework of what is involved here with any policy. What is on our agenda tonight, as it relates to this particular item, is first reading. It's almost like making the motion to start considering by the board. And what happens after this meeting, some initial questions may come up, some initial comments from the board. We have a district-wide policy committee. Mrs. Blaibor and I are both Board of Ed reps on that. We have a meeting scheduled to consider the comments that come in at the first reading and start looking at new policies. But to clean up what we're doing in terms of the ones that are first reading for possible consideration at our meeting a month away. So we have a meeting planned. We have received 11 pages of comments today, and we received them this afternoon. We're looking through those, and certainly will be a broad consideration of the policy committee, which is a diverse committee from within the district, and then decide where to go from there. But just to let people know that this is a process that is involves communications, and if we need to do a better job on some of the communication pieces, then we definitely will commit to that. We are committed, I'll say this, we are committed to trying to move this year. And I'm not going to mince words on that. Because if we don't, we lose a year. It makes no sense to look at something like this, to do this in the middle of the year. Does it put extra pressure on us in terms of the communication piece and looking at the comments and getting back to people? Yes, it does. My own reading of the policy is that it, especially the policy document, and there's a regulation as well, that they are broad enough and flexible enough that we can address concerns that I've read today in the 11 pages, not comparing them against each one of the pages. But that's the process we'll be going through as a board, and we're not deciding this tonight. We're just in effect, if we approve the motion as it relates to policies and procedures, which is item 6C on our agenda, then we in effect move them for further consideration, but also further work for comments, and people are welcome to contact us. The other thing we're doing is we had a policy committee scheduled for tomorrow, and we've delayed that for 2 weeks so that we can receive additional comments and make additional considerations as we go through that process. So that's where we are on that. If there are no further public comments, we'll move on to the superintendent's report.
Thank you very much, Mr. Casey. Just a couple of quick comments, and I promised that I was going to do it, and I totally forgot. I attended the Nick Fight to Heal event, the year-end event at the library, and they gave me this cool little hat, and I said I was going to wear it at the board meeting, but I haven't actually worn a hat in who knows how long. So I just wanted to publicly acknowledge that I appreciate the hat, but more importantly, wearing the hat was symbolic of my appreciation of all the wonderful work our students are doing surrounding that initiative and the Nick Roundtable. For people unfamiliar with it, it's a huge initiative that's spearheaded because of the loss of 2 of our students, Nick and Luke, to battle childhood cancer. And they have done a wonderful job of fundraising, particular collaboration with Albany Med. And this is driven by students, and I was informed that now we have kids who are in college, who on their own college campuses are starting to start mini chapters of this. Mrs. Baber commented about robotics, same kind of thing. We have kids now going to college and seeing that, you know what, they can continue this same type of advocacy on their respective college campuses. Very pleased to see that. Another comment, wasn't planning to say it until Mrs. Baber mentioned robotics. I was speaking to Mrs. Barrow, and I get the names of this. Our robotics team attended a competition in Illinois over the spring break, and it's one of those things that the old notion that the student become the teacher. That's when, as the teacher, you've done a great job when the student becomes a teacher. We had multiple teams from across the country that were spearheaded by former Shen Robotics kids who are now working in different places and as employees serving as mentors have started a robotics team in their respective communities. Tremendous tribute, and they recognize that they got their start from Team 21. So I share those things because oftentimes those aren't the things that hit the presses, so to speak. But those are the things that speaks to the value of what we do as an education system. And the last comment, Mr. Delato certainly has more information, but just for the board, and I'll send some more information on Friday bulletin. As the board knows, Chuck Diedrich, who is the now outgoing superintendent for the Capital Region BOCES, will be leaving the BOCES end of June. It was just official that John Ugelski, a former Shen superintendent who removed, will be serving as an interim at the Capital Region BOCES for the 16-17 school year. And that's important to us because we do a lot of collaborations with BOCES for services. And so certainly I'm sure I'll be having a lot of conversations with John. One, he's familiar with Shen. And so I just wanted to share that with the board as well, that's news that's happening down the pike. So we're pleased for those things to happen. So thank you.
Thank you. We'll move to tenure recommendation. Mrs. Bush?
Good evening. I'd like to present an administrative tenure for Mrs. Kathleen Sherwin, Academic Administrator for English 612, and her tenure was written, come on up Kathleen, was written by Dr. Elizabeth Wood, her direct supervisor. A couple of things to say about Kathleen. We were able to have her join our staff from Guilderland, where she was a teacher, and this is her first administrative position, and throughout the time that she's been here, in the 3 short years, she has developed the comprehensive curriculum maps, led the English department in those, also developed a cohesive sequential English program as illustrated by our English progressions documents. And for those of you that have been here a while, that also means that we have a development of the English 11 course for our students and revised English Regents in some of the other courses. She's credible and highly professional administrator, a leader who defines vision and shares the vision with others. She also is willing to listen and is very flexible in what she does. In addition to nearly 50 formal evaluations every year, where she has provided detailed feedback to teachers, she's also conducted 30 informal classroom observations each year beyond the traditional APPR. Increasingly, teachers have seen Mrs. Sherwin's presence as both supportive as a supervisor and as an instructional colleague who is willing to lend support to improve practices. And Dr. Wood says, it is my pleasure to recommend Mrs. Kathy Sherwin for tenure in Shenendehowa. She has demonstrated a sincere and consistent commitment to excellence and a willingness to embrace and lead change within the English department for the benefit of the students and continued enhancement of the academic program.
Thank you. So can I ask for the indulgence of the board, because I don't know, if we need to do this by two-thirds, we got two-thirds here. Amend our agenda, and let's take an action item and do this for Kathy while she's standing up here. And come on up, Kathy. So can I have a motion to amend the agenda to handle this? Let's do that two ways. Jim, second. Todd, I saw your hand up there.
sure.
Okay. All those in favor of amending the agenda, do that. We're all in favor. Would someone like to make a motion? Mary, motion that we approve your tenure. And Jim, second. Comments? All those in favor?
Wait, I have a comment.
With pleasure. Yeah, yeah.
Can I just, I looked at it with a different lens at the tenure recommendation, and so a couple of the things that Mrs. Bush mentioned were there, but I really just want to acknowledge what was said about your communication with parents. And just am very grateful for that, and that you were the one who drove the college essay clinic at the high school for students, and I can tell you exactly how valuable that is to students who are in the midst of that process. And the other thing that I just was so grateful to read is the servant leadership that you demonstrate for our school district and our students. And your first administrative position, hopefully you'll never have to top it, because this is amazing. I'm just grateful.
Thank you so much, Mary.
So let's do this. All those in favor? Okay, motion carries. Congratulations.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Bob. Thank you so much.
We're moving on to information items. The first one is the schedule of Board of Education meeting dates, which was in our packet. Anybody have any, we don't need to, it's here for information. Any questions or comments before we move on with that? So it's in our file.
I want to mention the retreat piece that we're talking about.
The retreat piece, we actually talked about doing trying to handle in one day on August 23rd. We were, just in terms of availability, people and trying to make it work. So that's what we're hoping for. Look at your schedules and see if that.
Jim is sitting there thinking, I don't have to worry about that.
I'm going to really miss you guys. Okay. Anyway, yeah, get back to the superintendent's office if you have concerns on that date, okay? And Mrs. Carmen.
Good evening. So tonight we have 11 policies that are going for first reading. These are from our April Policy Review Committee meeting. It looks like it's more than that, but there's many that have forms that are related to them. The questions that you had earlier.
I would like to make some comments, and I would also like to respond to some of the things that have been brought forward. I did have a chance to look at the document that was circulated. One of the things that really was compelling was people were saying, where is this coming from? Another set of comments was, what do parents think about this? And I thought this would be a good opportunity as a parent's perspective and as a board member who listens to a lot of the parents' comments. Okay, and I really want to just answer, where is this coming from? For the last several years, a lot of parents get very frustrated with the inconsistency and things like minimal or very poor feedback from certain teachers. And it gets very frustrating to try to explain to a parent why that's occurring. The first thing I noticed, I think this is my first year on the board, we had one of the parents from elementary school came up and said, said I have twins. One has one teacher, one goes to the other, and there's a huge disparity every night. One teacher has a lot more, and another teacher has a lot less. And how do you explain that to that family? Okay, so that's the kind of thing that kind of, from my gut, drives a lot of the reasoning and the background behind this. It's very inconsistent. What I see with all of our summer programs, we have great programs for the accelerated students, but when you talk to them, they say, look, I did in 5 paragraphs, I turned it in, and when it finally got graded, it was really just this diagram I had to do. Okay, and sort of that tells the student, you're not valued when we ask you to do that. So I think that's sort of another abuse that has crept in the system. Now, I don't think this is any person. I think that we as a district have not looked at this in quite a while, if at all, and we need to get a better handle on it. The other thing that came to my attention, and I learned this last year, a group of students, not in elementary, but they had a situation where a teacher simply did not bring a paper back to them with any comment. It took 150 days. And this was all in social media. All these students were going, it's taking this long. It got to the point the students were going out and running their own internal poll to see who would finally get the right number of days. Okay? And to me, that is an abuse of the system. That's not what we're all about in this district. We've got to get these things figured out, and we're doing it in a way that I think has been very methodical. We're doing it in a time period where a lot of the acrimony that we saw last year with the APPR, with high-stakes testing is somewhat behind us. And I think this is the type of thing we need to fill the void with some deep discussions on this. I think a lot of them have been held. The thing I think we want to look at is there's a process to the policy development. We saw this last year with a policy that was very controversial. This one is also controversial, but we also owe it to ourselves to bring it forward with a document that the policy committee has come forward and says, we believe this is a solid document, not perfect, and then we want to take a good look at what we can add to it between first and second reading. And I think in the spirit of doing that, that's the direction we're moving, okay? It may be an intense period where a lot of things will be looked at, but we also have to be very careful what we say. I am concerned that, one of the comments was that we may be violating a New York State education law. When you bring something like that, you're sort of becoming a bomb thrower, and we don't want to have bomb throwing in here. I think we want to be factual with what we know, and we want to be very methodical so we don't lose momentum. My concern is that if we don't do this in this pace, we're going to spend a lot more time simply going through these circular arguments, waiting on something. I think the board's role is to step forward and to be grounded with some expectations and provide an azimuth and some expectations of what to do more of, what to do less of. And that allows this to flow through our district leadership team, to the academic advisors, to our principals, and to our teachers in a way that I think is properly moving forward in a way that gets this managed properly. I also want to bring forward, but before I heard the comments, a couple things I think do need to be added in terms of the spirit of what we want to do between first and second reading. One of the things that does strike me is a need for a timely feedback expectation. I've seen too many situations where teachers just aren't turning papers back. I'm also seeing as we get more into technology, one thing is that the papers that do come back, they don't come back with any comments. And that prevents the student from having that teachable moment where a couple of days after they put that paper together, they worked their heart off, they worked intensely to put this paper together, and they're waiting sometimes 100 days to get something back. I don't think that's the expectation we want to have here. So that's something we want to do. When I talked to one student, he mentioned 2 times turnaround time. In other words, if the teacher says 3 days from you've asked to put this assignment together, you turn it in 3 days, then multiply that by 2, and that's the expected turnaround time. Okay? I'm not saying that applies to all situations, but as a parent, what I would like to see as this evolves is having that discussion with the teacher. What is your turnaround time on a test? How are you going to provide that feedback? I would much rather have timely feedback than additional more work, more problems, because they're doing a lot of this homework. And a lot of it seems to be very redundant, very excessive. And we need to take a good look at that with a clear eye. Another that I think is worth looking at is the summer workload for our accelerated students. I think this is something that just tends to to create an atmosphere that this is just a lot of work in the summer. It's worth my time to want to be involved in an accelerated class. And I think there's a balance point there, and I don't know if that's been addressed yet, but that would be something worth looking at. Two things that are somewhat combined is the 10-minute guideline rule. I think I'm hearing feedback that the high school students are probably doing more. At the same time, I look at the expectations for an uninterrupted, intensive, focused work environment. I think one of the ideas that has come forward is maybe we put sport expectations for parents in the policy, bringing forward the idea that, you know, you have an obligation. This is a social contract to some extent, very informal, but we are a school district. We employ teachers, we teach students, and parents have a key role to ensure that it's a uninterrupted, intensive, focused work environment. I think in this modern era with smartphones and such, that creates sort of this violation of the 10-minute rule. I came away looking at this, and some was from the comments that came through. You know, maybe that's the balance point we're missing. Are people doing enough to make sure that 2 hours for every senior is really uninterrupted, intensive, and focused? Or is it, you know, more things going on? And that's probably something we do need to look at and address here. Last piece, there's a need for a complaint and clarification process. If we don't already have one, and I could not find any in our policies, there might already be one there. But how do we deal with the situation when the teacher sees that their student is spending 4 hours a night? Okay, and I've been through this when I talked to certain parents. In one case, I said, look, you know, talk to the teacher, then you should talk to if they're not satisfied, talk to the principal. If not satisfied, talk to the superintendent. And typically, and I've seen this with a lot of times with complaints about teachers, the parents come up and say, I'm worried about retribution from the teacher. They control the grade. I really don't feel comfortable addressing this. And I've sat down and said, well, why don't you think about how you do that? And they don't feel comfortable bringing that up. And then when they graduate and move on to the next year, it's a new year. And the problem never seems to get fixed. So, you know, there are situations we have that I think there have been some noticeable abuses and neglect of our responsibilities, okay? And I think the policy addresses that in a way that we should be talking about preventing that. Because I don't want to go through another year of talking to parents and finding out that, you know, the accelerated course the student wanted to join and participate in really became a demotivator because the amount of summer work, not because of the work often, it's often because they get no feedback, okay? I don't want to find out that students are on social media yakking about why it's taking 120 plus days for a paper to come back, okay? And so we have to figure out how do we stop that while at the same time, you know, addressing the things that you have brought forward. Some are legitimate things that need to be looked at piece by piece, but from the perspective of a board member who's had to listen to a lot of parents, there's other factors here that have caused this thing to come about. So I hope I've addressed that part of it, and I think at this point I'm pretty much done, but just want to let you know, that's my perspective, and I'm sure that we're going to have an interesting month as we go through this and come up with what I think is the best solution for the district. Thank you. Thank you.
How about other comments? Gary?
I'm reacting at a visceral level, I'm afraid. I'm hearing regimentation. I'm hearing rigid process. I'm hearing response to anecdotal things that nobody wants to hear by setting up general rules instead of administrators doing their job to address individual teachers who have deficiencies and should be performing on a different level. I know. It depends on how much latitude, flexibility, and how broad the parameters are so that the extremes are eliminated and we're operating within a reasonable range rather than narrowing it right down to the point where professional judgment and the art of teaching is lost because we have to conform to a system.
Okay. Anyone else? I do want to say one additional comment on this, because I don't want anyone to leave here with the feeling it's us against them. It's all us. It's as an educational system, we need to do what's right for the kids and the students, and that was clearly pointed out in the document we received today. And so we're on the same page on that. And this isn't a finger-pointing exercise. But as a district which prides itself on looking forward and being a leader, I think, Bob, it is incumbent on us to have a policy that is clear and that gives enough flexibility. I went back. I'm on the policy committee, so I looked at these words before, and I looked at them again today after getting it, and I can see some red flags in here. So when we talk about the time thing, for instance, and here it says, teachers shall adhere to the 10-minute rule. Up above, it talks about guidelines. I'm not sure that it wouldn't indicate more flexibility if we said teachers shall attempt to follow the 10-minute guideline or something. I think there's some wordsmithing that we can do. I think words get in the way sometimes of people seeing what the intent is and intent and purpose. We certainly will look at that over the next month and see where we go from there. But this is only for information purposes tonight. Put it on the table and start the discussion with the board and anyone who wants to contact us, and we've been contacted already.
I just want to clarify. I wasn't reacting to the document itself.
No,
I was reacting to Bob's statement.
Yeah. We understand. Besides, we're supposed to discuss these things, back and forth, and, come from a different perspective. Any additional comments on these policies? Yeah,
I
Jim?
do, but it's not on homework and grading.
Yeah,
policy.
sure. No.
And I apologize for not bringing some of these up.
No, that's okay.
You're laughing. You're going to miss me.
Yes, I will.
First one is on policy 7460 regarding prayer in the schools. Just a general comment, and I'll, in another policy, suggest that something from that policy be placed here, but I'll get to that later. It occurred to me when I first read this policy in order that First Amendment is not limited to prayer. It's much broader. It encompasses religious speech, religious exercise, of course, subject to reasonable time, place, and manner restrictions. And I want to say, as I reviewed the policies in order, it became apparent to me that we as a district have considered those things pretty well. So kudos. I just wanted to make that comment while I was on that. Next is on the regulation for 8360. And this is just more wordsmithing than anything else. On page 3 of that policy, of that regulation. The very last line. It seems to me that it might be better stated to say the district shall not discriminate nor deny equal access to facilities on the basis of religion.
Yeah, we said that. Yeah, religious, no, it's just plain religion.
Right, but also,
Nor
and
discriminate,
just so it's
nor deny
grammatically
equal access.
consistent.
Yeah, and we can look at that.
Yep. On page 4, I was confused by the wording in that section about halfway down, teaching about religion. Just on the first line, public schools may not provide instruction about religion that is non-devotional and focuses on literature. Shouldn't that say public schools may provide instruction about religion that is
Jim,
non-devotional?
it's interesting because this is one of the frustrations we have when lawyers write things. And I'm not kidding you, just because you're an attorney. A lot of the language is in what we would call logical sequential language. And a lot of this we actually pull from different places. So we're always trying to figure out how do we, in changing things to be more, if you want to say, ease for grammatical and reading, how do we not lose the meaning? So with that being said, this is one of those paragraphs, again, that we'll look at to make sure that if we turn it around, so to speak, that we have the same meaning. But we'll look back at that.
Is your point, Jim?
It's the not.
That the non, right?
It's a double negative. because
It is a double negative.
It's the
yeah,
not
yeah.
and non.
I see exactly what you're saying.
Not a non-denominational,
that's it.
so it affirms the capacity of the school. And so the question is, what are we trying to do?
What's the meaning? So we'll look at that, Jim. And just a point too, if you don't mind, can you circle and share the document with Mrs. Carmen so we make sure that after we go back after the fact, we're addressing those specific
Oh, sure. I
areas?
can give you these.
Okay. All right, thanks.
And not to belabor, but I think in keeping with what I said initially, about what the First Amendment, my perspective of what the First Amendment provides, but it's a legal perspective. The last line of that paragraph, where it says that that the district endorses religion, I think to be consistent, it should say that the district endorses a particular religion.
So all efforts shall be made by staff to avoid religious expression at risk, giving the
That's consistent
impression.
with your statement of policy.
And again, this is one of those that the cut and paste piece. So we'll look at those. Again, our whole
Good
notion
point.
is that we don't want to be interpreters of language as prescribed to us. And if or when we do it, we don't want to change the intended meaning. So we'll look at those things to make sure that in changing one word or another, we don't actually change the meaning from someone else who's doing, because there's a couple of them where we have with emphasis on what I call the two sides of the coin, where it says, thou shalt do head and not do tail, versus you can imply doing head meaning you're not doing tail. But because a lot of these have been tested in courts, and unfortunately, sometimes the ruling and determination in the court, the final, you probably have a better understanding what I'm talking about. The final wording of some of these court cases are, quite frankly, you scratch your head, but then when you look at it, you say, okay, it's because people were actually playing with words. And so therefore the wording becomes important. I say that in the sense that we have to look at the wording the same way, and we'll look at that and make sure that we're not losing the meaning. All these things, we make sure we don't lose the intended meaning, be it off the law or whatever court cases might be driving those laws. So we'd certainly look at that.
Okay. Final comment on first reading policies is just on policy 8420, patriotism in school events. Down at the bottom, that last paragraph would seem to me to be better placed perhaps in the school prayer policy, because we're talking about patriotism in the first two paragraphs, and then the final paragraph talks about clergy and religious observances.
That's a good point.
If nothing else, should be at least minimally repeated.
Right.
Yeah.
Cross-reference there,
Yeah. And this is one of those policies too. We struggle because we have some other policies that seem to be saying that one thing, but one is more internal, what we do in school. This is more a school-related event, external to events, graduations, for example, and, saying the Pledge of Allegiance is a certain thing, and then how does even religion come into certain events? And so this was one of those that we struggle. Do we merge? Do we not merge? It's better to keep them separate. But you're right, so the redundancy sometimes can be beneficial, so we'll look at that. So very good points. Again, if you could please share those. Yeah.
Thank you, Jim. Any additional comments?
Not this time.
Thank you. Becky, we'll move on to consent items. Could I have a motion to accept the consent items, the treasurer's report, in the minutes of April 5th and April 19th? Mary, second. Todd, any questions or comments? All those in favor? The consent items are approved.
Mr. Case, I just kind of ask one question before you go too far on the agenda. Related to the homework and grading policy, just from a process perspective, can I ask if board members, if you have specific comments, can you email the comments to us, and quite frankly, within short order, next several days, midweek next week? One reason why, we don't want to be sitting around wondering what people are thinking and then find ourselves come back here in June and hearing thinking for the first time again. So please share with us prior, because we're looking to have a policy review, I think 25th, 26th of May, and clearly we want to have that before we go into that meeting. So I'm asking if you could, either myself or Mrs. Carmen or Dr. Wood, either one of us or all of us share those specific things so we can see what revisions we need to make as we move forward. Again, email is great because then we could literally manipulate the document as we go along. So thank you.
Thank you. We'll move into action items, student special education placement.
Okay.
Mr. Mala's here.
Yes, I am here.
Can we have a motion? Todd, second Jim. Any questions or comments from Mrs. Milan?
My questions were addressed. Thank you.
All those in favor? Motion carries. Thank you very much. Jill's back up here for approval of staffing recommendations.
Yes, just wanted to make a couple of comments on, we have retirements in the classified staff this time. Pamela Crispino has been with us for 17 years. She's retiring as a teacher aide. Margot Cruther is the Octay secretary, retiring after 26 years with the district. Marjorie Fisher, retiring after 23 years in the food service department. William Johnson, he goes by Bill, retirement after 29 years. He's groundskeeper, cruise chief. Liberato Martelli, some of you may have seen Liv. He has been here in Gowanna for quite some time. He's retiring after 16 years as the head night cleaner. Lorraine Robinson is an elementary school monitor at Oranjan, and she's retiring after 21 years. Trudy Vickery is retiring after 26 years as a bus driver. And Diane Walsh is a special ed teacher aide, retiring after 13 years.
And what about Mrs. Davis, who we met this afternoon at the 25th?
Yes.
Has she, we done that before, or is she?
I would like to ask, to request to have that at another time. Marie Davis is going to be officially, I don't even know if retirement's the right word, but retiring as one of our sub-callers after 33 years with the district, and has never missed a day. So,
Yeah, but we'll have that on another agenda. I couldn't recall if we'd seen it
Yes.
before. Okay. Do we have a motion to move forward on the staffing recommendations?
Did you want to include the transportation changes too?
Yes. Oh, I got the old agenda, yeah. With transportation changes, it's up there. Yes, could we have a motion for both? Mary, thank you. Second. Bob? All those in favor? Thank you, Joe.
Thanks, Joe.
We'll move on to appointment, business affairs. So we have some things, both with bids and election coming up, Chief Inspector of Election and Inspectors of Election. That's Kathy, that's a little different this year than what we normally do, right?
It is. We now got the list from the county to see who was trained on the new machines, new to us, not new to the voting workers. So we have some of the old group that we had before and some of the new group.
Oh, good.
So
Okay.
both.
Okay. Do we have a motion to, on the appointment, the recommendation to appoint the election inspectors? Bob, second. Jim? All those in favor? Motion carries. Item 2 is approval of additional extracurricular activity fund clubs. Could we have a motion on that? Mary, second. Jim? Any questions or comments? All those in favor? Motion carries. We have bids for physical education supplies, healthcare supplies, print management supplies, and athletic field renovations. Could we have a motion on that? Todd, second. Jim? Any questions, comments? All those in favor? Motion carries. Next, we have a couple of very generous donations. Can I have a recommendation that we move those, and then we can discuss those? Or how do we do this with gratitude? With gratitude, right? Yeah. Mary, Bob, second. Any comments?
I have some comments.
Yeah,
I do want to recommend, just looking at the capability that the donation from PVA Robotic Systems provides. This will create a lot of opportunities both for kids in our district as well as around the capital region. This company is doing very well. They're employing quite a few people. They started pretty much with a guy in a basement 25 years ago. Now it's about 130 people around the world. I work with them in my private sector job, and I think this is something you can really build on, and you can work potentially with some of the other companies in the area to get some of the other materials to make this stuff work. So I think you got the basis of a very good set of projects for the kids that want to go, students that want to go into dispensing equipment, robotics, things like that I think are always going to be pretty good for people to spend time with. That's
Good, thank you. And the other, call out the other large donation, pool sound system for the pool. These are, as I understand it, parents of a student who uses the pool and a sound system, which in those spaces, always difficult to get a good sound system. We didn't spend the money up front on this, and not only have they donated the system, but they donated the installation, a value of $44,400. So again, with gratitude, All those in favor? We never turn down donations, and the next item is the scholarship and local grant donations, a recommendation for Kathy, they total almost $10,000. Can I have a motion on that? Jim, second. Bob, questions or comments? All those in favor? Motion carries. I think I misspoke when I said that we did have, for information purposes, the meeting schedule. We actually have to adopt that so we can get that published out there. So can I have a motion to adopt our 2016-2017 Board of Education meeting schedule? Bob, second. Jim?
Question. For clarification, I thought at one point we talked about splitting the retreat. Did we change? That's an active change?
It was a conflict, date conflicts.
Okay, so
that's-
just the one day. Okay, thank you.
And if it needs to, we try to reschedule some other time as well.
And part of that was, in terms of the thinking we had, was one, we knew we had a conflict. The second was, as we talked, last year we spent time at the retreat on defining the goals piece, and we had that goals committee underway, so we thought it would relieve some of that pressure from last year. So all those in favor? Motion carries. And finally, we have a recommendation for award recommendations, Internet Service Provider. Can I have a motion on that, please? Jim, second. Bob? Questions or comments?
I need to abstain from this one. My brother works for First Light, so I'm going to stay away from that one.
And you work for Time Warner.
I work for Time Warner, so, yeah.
You got both.
All
You guys were
around,
in
that's not a good
competition. Did you
situation.
just speak to each other?
He's the enemy.
That being said, any other comments? All those in favor? The motion carries. And then finally, we have second reading of policies and procedures. Mrs. Carmen is making her way back up here. We've had these to look at. Any comments or suggestions on that? Jim?
I just have one question, and it's not a wording question. This is on policy 8330, objection to instructional materials. The final paragraph there, a student may be excused from the study of specific materials in conflict, et cetera, How does the testing work with that? I mean, if they're able to opt out, yet, do they get tested on alternatives, or how does that work, or homework?
In the area, I can speak from the area of health education, and Dr. Wood may want to speak from the other areas because I'm not 100% sure. But I know that they have the ability to opt out, but they're still responsible for that content. And we work with the parents through communication of, if it's material that we send home, information that they want, if it's information that they're using from the textbook, they're responsible to teach that to their children, and then they are still responsible for the content itself.
Okay, so we're not exempting them from the content, it's just from being exposed to it in school.
Correct.
And just a key point, the wording here is probably the most significant piece of it. Demonstrated, and we probably should put and or, established religious beliefs or practices. The reason why that's important, because you have a lot of people say, I can't do that, it's against my religion. Oh, really? What's that religion? Demonstrate to us what's that violation, and it changes a lot of conversations. And so sometimes we see that even with choices of books, but we say, okay, fine. When I say books, reading not necessarily core textbooks, but fictions or novels and things. Right. So fine, we'll choose another one of the similar level. So it often eliminates that piece of it that comes from the equation. Some years back, we had a whole issue of, in science, teaching of creationism versus whatever the opposite is. And so, again, that became not our issue. In the state of Texas, they made a law that did one certain thing. In the state of New York, doesn't have the same. Really, we had a parent, and Bill, remember the conversation, High School West, there's a growing issue. We're saying, we hear you. But this is what, by state of New York curriculum, we're going to teach kids. And if you have some objection, particularly even issues about global warming, I don't believe in, I hear you. So you talk to your kids about what you believe, and we're going to try to keep it from a more scientific research perspective when we teach those kind of things. So occasionally it comes up in that arena where people are talking about what I believe, and we say, okay, I understand what you believe, but where's the established religious practice that you now demonstrate to us, and then we have to figure out, is this something that's valid to make those alternatives being provided? So it forces a conversation initially, and if it goes to a point where we have to do any follow-up, then we do the follow-up, be it with those established religious organizations themselves. To my knowledge, we haven't had it gone that far yet, and we hope we never have to go that far, but we have had a lot of those surface conversations. So that's why that end clause sentence, back to your notion of words, become more important, and looking at alternatives. Again, it doesn't exempt you from, but we talk about then what's the alternative, equivalent alternative for you to engage in.
Provides a framework
Yeah, yeah.
that's clear,
Yeah.
that we can point at once challenged. And I mean, it's not
And
to
it's
say
hard, yeah.
challenge and disagree, it's
Yeah.
challenge, and then we have something that we can work with.
Go through it, go with it. Yep, so,
Yeah.
again, good point.
Did we get a motion on those? I don't think so, okay. So I need a motion on approving the second reading policies and procedures. Can I have a motion? Mary, second. Bob, any additional questions or comments? All those in favor? Motion carries. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We'll back to public comments. Anybody from the public who would like to comment at this point, welcome to do so. Recognizing that Mrs. Stevenson is returned to the fold here tonight.
Oh, you want to ask if Sheridan had any comments?
And Sheridan, would you like comments? Yeah. Thank you.
Sheridan's like, I'm good.
Okay.
It's after 9 o'clock. I'm
So
good.
before we ask for adjournment, just dates, you guys clearly said this, the school budget vote, I think, Jim and Todd, you're right on. I mean, in terms of anything, if you look at the trend line is, in some ways, you can feel relieved at that we must be doing something right, we're not stirring up a lot of, but we want people to participate. We need the feedback, and it's important, and it's important, I think, as well. Now, I remember going into the voting booth with my two daughters. And I knew, I'd have a good sense of which way the budgets were going to go, but I wanted them to see that there's a process and that you have a stake in this. And it's a great learning experience, especially when it's held in school. So we certainly would encourage people. Next Tuesday night, the following Tuesday, we have a study session, and then our first business meeting in June will be June 7th. So those announcements being made, could I have a motion for
We have community conversations up there.
in community conversation? Thank you. Community conversation this Saturday in Half Moon Heights at 9:30.
And we'll do the dedication of the Little Free Library at the beginning, and then do the community conversation.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful. So that's at 9:30 at Half Moon Heights at Cheryl's Lodge. So can I have a motion? Oh, yeah, I have a motion for adjournment from Todd. Second? Second. All those in favor? Thank you very much. Meeting's adjourned.
Not anymore.
No, we're going to do it at 9:30.
Not anymore.
Because favorite document went out at 9:30. So when people show up, is when we're going to do it. Trust me. Been there, done that. It's not first rodeo. We do it when we have the crowd.
Too regimented?
Hmm?
I'm too regimented?
It just sounded like it was going to be